Class, all the videos I posted yesterday, nothing's working. I don't know. So I'm starting again, but that's okay, I can correct it. Because in talking with Autumn, the best thing to do, I think, for this week, I want to make sure that you finish reading Ghilardi. He's got lots of interesting things to say, brings up a lot of important issues. I wanted you to post your answers and then not discuss, and she suggested even posting definitive answers. That gets to be too much, and you're all trying to get out of town and make arrangements, and okay, whatever. Fine. Make sure you do the reading. Take notes about what are the things you want to discuss about the readings. What do you think are the significant aspects that Ghilardi brings up that you want to discuss in class, and put those as your posting for this week. So not definitive answers to questions, but what are the questions that we want to make sure that we discuss when we get together on Wednesday. So that'll be all your posting. And everybody should be able to do that, or I think that's a reasonable request on my part, and will make our time together the most valuable. Because we have other stuff to do, but discussing Ghilardi fits right in with it. So now, let me talk a little bit about Ghilardi and some background stuff. One of the reasons why we did the whole historical development at the beginning, those first two books, was so that when you're reading something like Ghilardi, you have the tools to begin to evaluate, is this true? Does it actually fit our history, or am I being sold a bill of goods? To get a master's degree in theology and to teach theology and run a program of teachers of religion and such, teachers of faith, you need to be the ones to evaluate whether this or that resource is really true to the tradition, is solid or not. And I think using those first two books, you can begin to start doing that. Ghilardi has a particular perspective. I think it's a good perspective. It's a very American perspective, and he's bringing up issues that are important in the Americas. But it's still a perspective, and I want you to be able to see that and evaluate that for what it is. So having said that, he starts in chapter 4, some great stuff here. So in chapter 4, a people called to ministry. And he does this whole, all ministry is relational. This is really what we're going to get to the whole book in Hannenberg that we'll get to after the reading, or after we get together. This is about the ministry question, and ministry is indeed relational, a relational approach to ministry. But Ghilardi will start us on that way, and he's read Hannenberg, and he likes Hannenberg, so of course it'll be a good setup for that. A people called to discipleship, and this is the thing we were talking about, remember, on the couch with Anne and Celeste, that post about the Second Vatican Council and why is it so important. And afterwards we were discussing it more, and she brought up some good points that maybe I'm not being too balanced on. And the biggest one of those for this is that these states of life, he calls them here, I call them life commitments: marriage, religious life, consecrated celibacy. These things affect us profoundly because they affect every aspect of our life, and they affect us in the day-to-day and something that's core to who we are. But they don't completely determine us. As profoundly as these affect us, we are still more than being married or in religious life. We are more than this aspect of ourselves. So it doesn't completely define even our ministry or even our vocation, if you think of vocation as our call from God. And Ghilardi is right on target, saying our real vocation is to be disciples of Christ. And anything after that is simply a way of being a disciple of Christ. It's a second level thing. And that's a good way to think about it. So being a religious profoundly affects my way of discipleship, but not completely. There's parts of me that are outside of the effect of that are just because I'm baptized. This is the way I need to be a disciple of Christ. So be aware of those things when you read it, and think about your own call, but the call of the people that you're working with as well. What is their call to discipleship? What kind of call to discipleship do we want to get across to students in the CGS program? What do they need to know appropriate to their stage of development? What do the parents need to know, and how can you get that across to their parents? These are the kind of questions that I think we'll want to talk about, but you can keep in mind as you're reading this. Ghilardi's going to bring these things up. Then the last two, a people sustained by memory and a people led by a ministry of memory. We only have our faith because it was preserved for us for centuries and centuries. And it was preserved for us by people who believed this was important, believed it was good for us to know. And so they preserved it, handed it on, expanded it. But slowly, it's an organic thing. And so we're left with that balance of handing on and living out what we were given, incarnating it correctly for today, and improving it for the challenges of tomorrow, or empowering those who come after us to make this more appropriate for themselves. And that's this balance between tradition and progress that we're constantly going to have to feel. And we don't want to fall off either side of that, saying we have to mimic what was said before, whether or not we think that's appropriate for today, or whether we're just free to decide this is whatever we want it to be. Because we're certainly free to do that, but we're not really smart enough nor gifted enough by the Spirit to do that. And so we can create our own thing. That isn't Christianity. That isn't the faith that was handed on to us. And God has led us to this point. We need to let God lead us forward. Though, of course, it's a bit nebulous. How do we tell it's God leading us forward and all? So those are exactly the issues and what he's going to bring up here. So that's what it means to be apostolic, the faith as handed on by the apostles. Hold on just a second. Oh, so apostolic, we hand on the faith that was handed on to us by the apostles. And guided by the apostles, looked over by the people then that they chose. It was laid down as a faith, not just some random things that Jesus said, however we want to conceive of Jesus. And so you've already seen how we went from apostles to bishops, standing in that role of oversight of the faith of the church. And it's not just, so-and-so laid hands on so-and-so, unbroken apostolic line. It's a nice idea. It's a way of thinking about it. It's not historically true. So we got to be careful in how we think about it. But we can't be so caught up in yesterday that we don't see the world in front of us and what God is moving us to now. Because it's also only true if the Holy Spirit is still with us and still incarnating Jesus Christ in our world today. And that is the church today. So we have to believe that God is still present to the church. And so we are free to innovate in some way, but not in other ways. And that's the discernment part. What can change and needs to change, God is asking us to change, leading us to change. and what part has to stay the same, or what kind of changes are authentic and what are not. And that's the questions we're going to get to in the last piece. And of course, that's important when you're teaching as well. You know, here's the faith, but what is in that? And we don't want to teach people that this is a faith that can never change in things that can change, because then when the little pieces change, it shakes them to their core. And they wonder, well, maybe just none of it really matters. All of it's up for grabs. So that's what we have to think about. So write down, keep those in mind as you read. Write down in your notes the things you want to get to, and we'll have a great conversation on Wednesday. I really look forward to seeing you all. Blessings.